Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Teresa's Kitchen. Tonight, I just have a sweet tooth. And I figured since I had some extra bread left over, because we're not really bread lovers anymore like we used to be, I figured I will make a bread pudding. So, in order to make my bread pudding, it was a few days old anyway, the bread. So make sure you have some old bread. Um, and what I've done is basically let the bread sit out to make sure that it was dry, like stale kind of bread. Let it set out in the air for a few hours. Or you could just simply place it in the oven and let it bake for about 10 minutes on 350 so it can get that stale feeling, not all the way cooked kind of feeling. Well, that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. And I'm going to get started. It's going to be a bread pudding with a caramel sauce. So I'm going to begin to cut up at least 8 cups of bread. So once I get it cut up, I'll be coming back to you and I'll let you know exactly how many slices of bread you will need in order to make a cup. So this is a cup to begin with. So I'm gonna have to fill up at least 8 cups of these. So I'll tell you about how many slices, okay? I'll be right back with you. And you know what? I forgot to say, you can actually cut the bread up into like bite sizes. Because that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna cut them up into bite sizes. You can cut the bread up as big as you want it, but just make sure the bread is like, has a, do you hear that? That means the bread is stale. That means it's gonna absorb all of the wet ingredients. So that's why it's important to let the bread either set out for a few hours like I have, or either to place it in the oven on 350 and let it go ahead and begin to dry out. And so this is like a whole loaf right here. So I'll get back and let you know how many slices you'll need to a cup. So you will need exactly 3 slices of bread. I pretty much cubed up the bread to my likings, what size bread I wanted it to be. So when it begins to absorb all the liquids, it can handle it. So in order to make this recipe, you will need 8 cups of bread, which is equal out to 3 slices of bread, okay? You can pretty much use anything. When I say anything, any type of bread. This is actually honey wheat bread that I have left over. You can use white bread. You can use the cinnamon bread with the raisins in it. And you can be creative. So now I've cut up all of my bread and it's into bite-sized chunks, okay? And it filled up my whole bowl, so that's a lot of bread. I didn't actually use the whole pack of bread, so. So the next thing I'm gonna be doing is measuring out my milk. I'm gonna be measuring 2 cups of milk and I'm gonna pour it in the bowl. So that's 1 cup, 2 cups. And to the 2 cups of milk, I'm gonna go ahead and crack 4 eggs over into the mixture. Make sure you don't get any eggshells in it. So we have our 1 egg, 2, 3, and 4. And to the mixture, I'm going to be adding a tablespoon of cinnamon. Now, if you like to add in some nutmeg, your choice. Just giving you your options. So I have 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon of the cinnamon going into the mixture. And another teaspoon of vanilla is going to be going into the mixture as well. So I'm just gonna add another half a teaspoon of the cinnamon to the wet ingredients. Only a half. Remember, I already told you a teaspoon earlier. So this is a half a teaspoon to make sure the flavor profile is there. So while all of this mixing is going on, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350. Okay. And so now to that, I'm going to add a half a cup of sugar to my mixture. And then all I'm going to do is pretty much whisk it together. You can get a fork, or if you have a whisk. I don't have a whisk. So I'm going to get a fork, and I'm just going to whisk and blend your ingredients together for those of you all who don't know what it is. And this is what it looks like. It looks like almost a, what is this? A French toast batter. That's what it is. It's more like a French toast batter. So any of you who made French toast before, don't be scared of the process. So instead of you dipping the bread in the mixture, you're going to be pouring the mixture over the bread itself. So all you're doing is mixing the wet ingredients together, and then you're going to add it to the bread that has already been chopped up. That's all you're doing, and that's all you're doing is whisking your ingredients together. And this is what it would look like. Okay, so to a bowl, I've added 2 tablespoons of sugar. And I will be adding a tablespoon of cinnamon. And we're just gonna mix those ingredients together. And here it's completely blended. So this ingredient is actually gonna go on top of the bread pudding. So I have a 9 by 13 pan, square pan, that I'm gonna be using to put the bread pudding in. And after I put it in, I'm actually going to spray the pan completely. Make sure you spray it all the way around. So it's sprayed. And now the only thing I need to do is add my bread pudding to the pan. And I'm just gonna spread it out. Now you remember when I told you that when you work with bread pudding, you can pretty much put anything in it. So what I'm gonna add to it is that I'm gonna chop up some pecans to my bread pudding. And what I measured out was like a half a cup of pecans. And I'm just gonna add it to the mixture. So, here are my chopped pecans. And I'm just gonna lightly fold those into the mixture before it goes into the oven. I really don't want them to go and be left on top of the mixture because I don't want them to brown or cook a little bit faster, so I'm just gonna fold it in just a little bit. Now that I have those pecans in, we can move forward. Now what I'm gonna do, the sugar mixture with the cinnamon and sugar, I'm just gonna simply sprinkle it on top of the mixture, the bread pudding mixture. And I'm gonna place it in the oven that's been preheating on 375. You're gonna let it cook in the oven for at least 30 to 40 minutes. When you see it begin to puff out and brown, that means it's done. So this is what it looks like prior to going into the oven. So here's the bread pudding that came out of the oven. It has cooked for a whole 40 minutes. So you're gonna allow it to cool off. Or some of you can eat it hot, or you can let it just cool off. So this is what it looks like. Looks good. So I'm just gonna let it cool off for a few minutes before I actually serve it up. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and begin the caramel sauce. It calls for 1 stick of butter, so I'm gonna let that butter melt on medium high. A half a cup of heavy whipping cream I'm gonna place inside of the pan with the butter while it's melting. And I would need a half a cup of brown sugar. And that's also going to go inside of the pan. And I will be turning all the ingredients together. Make sure all the heavy whipping cream is out. So I'm just gonna get, like I said earlier, a half a cup of brown sugar. Try to pack it before I put it in the pan to make sure it has the level of sweetness that it needs. And I'm actually gonna level off the sugar. It's not gonna be a heaping spoon of sugar. So, I have all of my ingredients together. The only thing I need to do is stir and let it simmer for at least 5 minutes. So I'm gonna stir it. Pan is trying to run away, so put it back on the burner. So the pan is on medium heat. I'm gonna turn it down on low so it can simmer for the next 5 minutes. So this is what it's looking like once I basically had it on the medium heat. And so now I'm just gonna allow it to simmer for the next 5 minutes. So here's the bread pudding fresh out of the oven. As you can see, look at the corners of it, nice and brown, and it's nice and tender looking and moist. And here's the caramel sauce that has been simmering. That's gonna go on top of it. Just gonna take a little stir of it. And this is what it should look like at the end. It's been about 5 minutes. And as you can see, the color has darkened. So that means it's ready to be served. So here is the final product. I have a bread pudding with pecans and dried cranberries in it, along with a homemade caramel sauce and pecans. So this is the final product. I hope you like what you see. Comment, like, and subscribe. Again, homemade bread pudding. Enjoy, and thank you once again for visiting Teresa's Kitchen.